Uttama-shloke Bhaktir Naishtaki. By regular attendance on the classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, almost all that is troublesome to the heart is completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So we're starting to read from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. The chapter is entitled Beyond the Lower East Side. He had left Vrindavan for this, and at first he had not been certain whether he would stay in America more than 2 months. In Butler, he had presented his books, but then in New York, he had seen how Dr. Mishra had developed things, and the Mayavadis had a big building. They were taking money and not even delivering the real message of the Gita. But the American people were looking. It had been a difficult year. His god brothers hadn't been interested in helping, although this is what their Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, wanted, and what Lord Chaitanya wanted. Because Lord Chaitanya wanted it, his blessings would come, and it would happen. This was a nice place, 26 Second Avenue. He had started here. The boys would keep it up. Some of them were donating their salaries. It was a start. Srila Prabhupada looked at his watch. He put on his tweed winter coats and his hat and shoes, put his right hand in his bead bag, and continued chanting. He walked out of the apartment, down the stairs, and through the courtyard, which was now frozen and still, its trees starkly bare without a single leaf remaining. And he left the storefront behind. He left even while Brahmananda, Rupanuga, and Satsaru were at their office jobs. There was not even a farewell scene or a farewell address. Chapter 22, Swami Invites the Hippies. January 16, 1967. As the United Airlines jet descended on the San Francisco Bay Area, Srila Prabhupada turned to his disciple, Ranchor, and said, "The buildings look like matchboxes. Just imagine how it looks from Krishna's viewpoint." Srila Prabhupada was 71 years old, and this had been his first air trip. Ranchor, 19 and dressed in a suit and tie, was supposed to be Srila Prabhupada's secretary. He was a new disciple and had raised some money he was a new disciple but had raised some money and had asked to fly to San Francisco with Srila Prabhupada. During this trip, Srila Prabhupada had spoken little. He had been chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. His right hand in his cloth bead bag. He had been fingering one bead after another as he chanted silently to himself. When the plane had first risen over New York City, he had looked out the window at the buildings growing smaller and smaller. Then the plane had entered the clouds, which to Prabhupada had appeared like an ocean in the sky. He had been bothered by pressure blocking his ears and had mentioned it. Otherwise, he hadn't said much, but had only chanted Krishna's names over and over. Now, as the plane began its descent, he continued to chant, his voice slightly audible, Krishna, 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 and he looked out the window at the vista of thousands of matchbox houses and streets stretching in charted patterns in every direction. When the announcement for United Airlines Flight 21 from New York came over the public address system, the group of about 50 hippies gathered closer together in anticipation. For a moment, they appeared almost apprehensive, unsure of what to expect or what the Swami would be like. Roger Segal: we were quite an assorted lot, even for the San Francisco airport. Mukunda was wearing a Merlin the magician robe with paisley squares all around. Sam was wearing a Moroccan sheep robe with a hood. He even smelled like a sheep. And I was wearing a sort of blue homemade Japanese samurai robe with small white dots. Long strings of beads were everywhere. Buckskins, boots, army fatigues, people wearing small round sunglasses. The whole phantasmagoria of San Francisco at its height. End quote. Only a few people in the crowd knew Swamiji. Mukunda and his wife Janaki, Ravindra Sarupa, Raya Rama, all from New York. And Allen Ginsberg was there. A few days before, Allen had been one of the leaders of the Human Be in Golden Gate Park, where over 2,000 had come together, a gathering of the tribes for a joyful powwow and peace dance. Today, Allen was on hand to greet Swami Bhaktivedanta, whom he had met and chanted with several months before on New York's Lower East Side. Swamiji would be pleased, Mukunda reminded everyone, if they were all chanting Hare Krishna, and when he came through the gates, they were already familiar with the Hare Krishna mantra. They had heard about the Swami's chanting in the park in New York, or they had seen the article about Swamiji and the chanting in the local underground paper, The Oracle. Earlier today, they had gathered in Golden Gate Park, most of them responding to a flyer Mukunda had distributed, and had chanted there for more than an hour before coming to the airport in a caravan of cars. Now many of them, also in response to Mukunda's flyer, stood with incense and flowers in their hands. So you see the situation, just the kind of situation Srila Prabhupada was entered into, the kind of, you could say like it was the hippie movement was in its full swing, and if you just read about what they were wearing and stuff, it was quite different to today's scene, definitely quite different. It was quite a extraordinary situation Srila Prabhupada was going into. And once in a interview, someone asked Srila Prabhupada, what is a hippie? And Srila Prabhupada said, you would know better than me. And then he said, something extraordinary. A hippie is something extraordinary. Yeah, it was for Srila Prabhupada, you can imagine what it was like coming from India, which was at the time even much more conservative than now, into this sort of crazy sort of scene. But Srila Prabhupada didn't. He took whatever Krishna sent him. He saw the potential in all of them, and he fanned whatever spark was there in anyone, whether they were dressed in some crazy way or not. If they had some attraction for Krishna, then he fanned that spark and worked with it, and gradually you could see how he built up the movement. And just the final note, just Allen Ginsberg. I'm not sure how much because it's sort of before our time, but he was actually a very famous person. Allen Ginsberg was very famous. He was a poet, but like very well known and famous. And I've even come across him when I studied English at university. I've come across he's been referred to in essays and things, like that. So he really was quite. It was quite a good thing for Srila Prabhupada to have him become favorable to Krishna consciousness, and it was good for them for the movement. Okay, all right. So in there. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita Ki Jai. So today reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4. Is it on the board? Yeah, 28, that's right, yes. It's in a different place, yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's all good, yeah. 25, yeah. Cool. Okay. So the chapter is entitled Puranjana Becomes a Woman in the Next Life. Um, did you say 25? 55, that's right, yeah. Didn't look familiar. Thought I'd prepared on the wrong verse for a moment there. Awesome. Okay. Satam vihaya mambando gato gramya matir mahim vicharan padam adrikshi kaya chinnimitam striya satam vihaya mambando gato gramya matir mahim vicharan padam adrakshi kaya chinnimitam striya satam vihaya mambando gato gramya matir mahim vicharan padamadrakshi kaya chinnirmitam sriya. Satam vihaya mambando gato gramya matir mahim vicharan padamadrakshi. Yeah. Matapis.
ওটা ঠিক করতে দেখেছি
So
ভুলে অবস্থা না
that's Swam yourself. Vihaya leaving. Me. Bandho. Oh friend. Gataha went. Gramya material. Matihi whose consciousness. Mahim to earth. Vicharan traveling. Padam position. Adrakshihi you saw. Kaya chit by someone. Nirmitam manufactured, striya, by a woman. My dear friend, you are now my very same friend. Since you left me, you have become more and more materialistic. And not seeing me, you have been traveling in different forms throughout this material world, which was created by some woman. Purport. When the living entity falls down, he goes into the material world, which was created by the Lord's external energy of the Lord. Which was created by the external energy of the Lord. This external energy is ascribed herein as some woman or Prakriti. This material world is composed of material elements, ingredients supplied by the Mahatattva, the total material energy. The material world created by this external energy becomes the so-called home of the conditioned soul. Within this material world, the conditioned soul accepts different apartments or different bodily forms and then travels about. Sometimes he travels in the higher planetary systems and sometimes in the lower planetary systems. Sometimes he travels in higher species of life and sometimes in lower species. He has been wandering within this material world, within this material universe since time immemorial. As explained by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadipaya Bhakti Lata Bij. Chaitanya Charitamrita 19:151. The living entity wanders into many species of life, but he is fortunate when he once again meets his friend, either in person or through his representative. Actually, it is Krishna who personally advises all living entities to return home, back to Godhead. Sometimes Krishna sends his representative, who, delivering Krishna's very message, canvasses all living entities to return home, back to Godhead. Unfortunately, the living entity is so greatly attached to material enjoyment that he does not take the instructions of Krishna or his representative very seriously. This material tendency is mentioned in this verse as gramya matihi, sense gratification. The word mahim means within this material world. All living entities within this material world are sensually inclined. Consequently, they become entangled in different types of bodies and suffer the pangs of material existence. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stavitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. When was Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who is established within this material world, the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet. Panchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who can fulfill the desires of everyone just like desired trees, and are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Chaitanya Swamini Namane Namami Bhakti Chaitanyam Prabhupada Sevanam Shivrajadana Mahatmya Padashkam Kripanavam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarane I read the translation once more. My dear friend, you are now my very same friend. Since you left me, you have become more and more materialistic. And not seen me, you have been traveling in different forms throughout this material world, which was created by some woman. So it's a very amazing verse. It's actually the super soul speaking to Puranjana. And so what he's saying is it's very, very deep. Um, it's very simple in one sense, but also very deep, because we're just very conditioned, and it's very hard for us to. We're so covered over that we can't see that the simple fact that what is stated in this verse. But gradually, as we progress in Krishna consciousness, then that will become more clear. That the super soul's right there in the heart, and then we've come to this material world to forget Krishna, but it's not, it's in a certain sense, it's not that hard to turn our attention back towards him. So the living entities in this material world, they've all come here due to being envious of Krishna, due to we've all come here due to wanting to imitate Krishna and find happiness separate from him. So Krishna didn't want us to come, but because we have independence, we have free will at least, so we can either use that free will to serve Krishna or to neglect Krishna. And the moment we neglect Krishna, then we have to come to the material world. That's described in the Prema Vivarta by Jagadananda Pandit. It's a famous verse Srila Prabhupada often quote. Krishna Bahir Mukha Haya Bhoga Vancha Kare Nikitas Da Maya Tare Japatiya Dare. Which means as soon as one becomes inimical to Krishna and desires sense gratification, he is immediately struck down by the illusory energy of the Lord. So Krishna is so merciful that he creates this material world through his external energy, just to give us a chance to become an independent enjoyer. In other words, we can't actually become independent. We can't fulfill that desire to be separate from Krishna and be like the enjoyer. Take that position of being the enjoyer. We can't do that by ourselves. We can't do that like by our own strength. But because Krishna is so merciful, he facilitates that for us because we really want it. So he provides the material world, and he covers us over with delusion and gives us like a play world, you could say, where we could try to live out this desire to be independent of him. Because all that we couldn't do ourselves, we couldn't even fall into illusion by ourselves. we can't even forget Krishna by ourselves. We need Krishna's help even to forget him. So Krishna, to facilitate our desire, he does that. And so this material world is like it's just like an arena or something, or it's like those you get these stories where it's like almost like a cartoon, but it's like a clay world, a world made out of clay. I forget now the name. There was some. It used to be on television when I was younger, like this little clay world, and they would make the little man and the little world, and he would do different things. And then at the end of the episode, you'll see these hands come and just all roll it up into a ball of clay again. So, it's actually this material world is like that. It's material elements that are shaped into different forms. But it's not the real thing. It's just like made out of matter, basically. That's described by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 4. Bhumir apo nalo vayu kam ano buddhi evacha. The Bhagavad Gita, yeah. Sorry. 7:4. Sorry, I wrote the first line down thinking I'd remember it, but I can't remember it now. Buddhi evacha. Okay, ahankara iti yame bina prakriti ashtada. There we go. So Krishna says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 elements comprise my separated material energies. So these are like the building blocks of this, you can say like make-believe world. And we're situated in it. Our very bodies are made of these elements and everything around us. And we're just sort of going about in this clay world, trying to do our thing. So Krishna shapes for us a body as a man, then he'll shape another body as a woman, and that way we can try to enjoy in that way. And in so many other ways, we're basically trying to enjoy matter. We're trying to take the position of being Krishna, basically, the enjoyer. So that's, in a sense, it's Krishna's mercy that he does that for us. But he never, even though he does that, he never leaves us. He always accompanies us as the super soul. And he goes with us as the super soul into any form of life that our karma takes us. Even if we go into the form of like Prabhupada would sometimes say, like a worm in stool, like the worst sort of life form one could have. But Krishna cares about us so much that he still stays with us, even in that abominable form, as the super soul. And all the time he's waiting for us to turn our attention back towards him and seeing, the moment we start to desire, generally the super soul just doesn't interfere, although he stays with us, but he doesn't interfere because he doesn't want to interfere with our free will. So he's just facilitating our karma, basically. He's like an independent observer, neutral observer. But at the same time, he does care, and he really wants us to turn our attention back towards Him. So the moment we start to desire actually something different, that maybe this is not working out, this idea of trying to enjoy the material world, maybe I should turn my attention back towards what is my real purpose, where did I really come from, and who is the Supreme Lord, how can I reconnect with Him. The moment the living entity starts to have those sort of thoughts and desires, then the super soul he can now facilitate that. So he's very eager to facilitate that. It can put us in contact with devotees. So that's described, that the super soul is present in everyone's heart is described in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 61. Ishvara sarvabhutanam hridaya arjuna tishtati Ramayan sarvabhutani yancharudrani maya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart as the super soul, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living beings who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. So, as we said, when the super soul sees that we want to come back to him, then he starts to facilitate that. And when one comes in contact with a spiritual master, then the two work as a team to gradually bring the living entity back to Krishna. That's the verse Srila Prabhupada quotes here in the purport. Brahmanda Brahmete Kona Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bij. That the living entity is wandering, is going to higher forms of life, and he's sort of like revolving in the material universe, going up and down all over, according to his karma. But by some great fortune, by the mercy of Krishna, he comes in contact with a spiritual master, a pure devotee. And then by the mercy of the pure devotee, he gets the Bhakti Lata Bij, the seed of the creeper of devotional service. And in that way, the spiritual master can gradually train him, and he can again become Krishna conscious. So it's a combined effort. So the super souls are only a real friend and our only real shelter. And he's been with us for lifetime after lifetime. Of course, we come in contact with many friends in every life, and family members, and what appears to be different forms of shelter, but then they're all taken away from us at the time of death. And we have to change our situation, and then again we start again. So the only real friend is the super soul, and he's the only real shelter. Actually, a real friend is only someone who can help us to connect with the super soul again. If we were to consider what is a friend, and that is why in practicing Krishna consciousness, we develop friendships with devotees, because such friendships are based on reality. They're based on our eternal relationship with Krishna, and as in Krishna consciousness, we help each other to become more Krishna conscious by hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord together, and helping each other in our progress in our devotional service to Krishna. So with friends in Krishna consciousness means that they're helping us to come under the real shelter of Krishna. And actually, association with devotees is non-different from, like when we associate with devotees, we're in the association of Krishna, because Krishna's devotees Krishna's present in the association of his devotees. So associated with devotees is also real shelter. So, as we said, the 11 entity can attain peace and real shelter if he again turns his attention back towards the Supersoul and surrenders to him. And that's described by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 62. Tameva sharanam gaccha sarvabhavena bharata tatprasadat param santim stanam prapsyasi sashvatam. O sign of Bharata, surrender unto him utterly. That's he's referring to the Supersoul. By his grace, you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. So Srila Prabhupada also mentions in the purport that aside from accompanying the Levinentia as the Supersoul, Krishna also comes himself or sends his pure devotees to try to convince the conditioned souls to surrender to him. So Krishna comes himself, and how he tries to get the conditioned souls to surrender to him again is by speaking Bhagavad Gita. And in Bhagavad Gita, he explains that this material world is a temporary and miserable place, and that our best course of action is to engage again in his devotional service and to surrender unto him. That's described in the 9th chapter, text 33. Kim purna brahmana punya bhakta raja shayastata anijam asukam lokam imam prapya jasvamam. So just context, the previous verse, Krishna explains that that anyone can become, anyone, even if they're lower born, can take shelter, they can come back to Krishna if they just take shelter of him. No, there's no there's no bars, there's no anyone can do it. And then he says in this verse, so how much more this is so of the righteous brahmanas, the devotees, and the saintly kings. Therefore, having come to this temporary, miserable world, engage in loving service unto me. So Krishna clearly describes it as anicam asukam lokam, temporary and miserable material world. And therefore, is encouraging us just, although you've come here now, like rectify the mistake by engaging in devotional service, in loving service unto me, which is this. So, and Krishna also gives his final conclusion in Bhagavad Gita that we should simply give up other ideas and other duties and just surrender unto him by engaging fully in his devotional service. So in chapter 9, text 34, we could get it. So Krishna says, Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mave vaishyasi sat yuktaivam atmanam mad parayana. Engage your mind always in thinking of me, become my devotee, offer obeisances to me and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. So that's Krishna's final instruction, and he also says in the 18th chapter, text 65. So he says here in text 65, Manmanava Bhavamat Bhakto. So it's a very similar verse actually. Madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vaishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosime. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. So, so Krishna's almost repeating himself. It's such an important instruction that he's basically repeating it. And in the verse after that, he says, Sarvadaman Pritjaja, Mamekam Sharanam Raja, Aham Tvam Sabrapapebyo, Moksha Yeshami Ma Suchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So, so this is Krishna's way of coming here personally and trying and to instruct the conditioned souls how they can come back to him. And the pure devotee, Krishna's representative, also does this. It's another way that Krishna gets the conditioned souls back. And what does the pure devotee do? He simply repeats Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita. That's what Srila Prabhupada gave us. It entitled his translation of Bhagavad Gita, which is coming in Parampara, as Bhagavad Gita as it is, because he's not changed anything. He simply presented it as he simply repeated Krishna's instructions as they are. Therefore, they have so much potency. And so the pure devotee tries to convince the conditioned souls to give up trying to enjoy the material world and rather engage in devotional service to the Lord. It's so Srila Prabhupada says right at the end of the purport that unfortunately the living entity, although I'll just read the sentence before that. Actually, it is Krishna who personally advises all living entities to return home back to Godhead. Sometimes Krishna sends his representative, who, delivering Krishna's very message, canvasses all living entities to return home back to Godhead. Unfortunately, the living entity is so greatly attached to material enjoyment that he does not take the instructions of Krishna or his representative very seriously. This material tendency is mentioned in this verse as gramya matihi, sense gratification. And if you look at the word for word translation, gramya means material, and matihi means whose consciousness. So our consciousness is absorbed in this idea of that we're going to be happy through sense gratification. But if somehow or other we can take Krishna's instructions seriously, then then we can gradually overcome this gramya matihi, this material consciousness, and revive our original Krishna consciousness. And this has been made, it gets like a lot easier for us by Krishna coming as Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya makes this a lot easier for the conditioned souls by introducing the process of chanting the holy name. So it is said that Krishna instructs the conditioned soul that you should surrender unto me. But Lord Chaitanya just gives freely love of Krishna. So he first allows one to taste the fruit of love of Krishna, the fruit of love of God, through the Sankirtan movement, through chanting the holy name. And then you can decide what you want to do. So it's, in a way, it's making it so much easier, because people in this day and age they're not very inclined. This gramya matahi is very prominent in the present moment. So people are very much really not inclined to spiritual enlightenment. Like previously, people really used to put a lot of effort into it, like really, a lot of people would put a lot of effort into it. But today, people are just the opposite. They really have, even if it's made very easy for them, they're still not inclined. It's just a very unfortunate situation. So, but if, and we're sort of fortunate because we've come from that position and somehow or other we're now engaged in this process. And if we just stick to the core basics of chanting the 16 rounds as attentively as possible and associating with devotees, we're in that association of devotees, we regularly hear and chant, and Srimad Bhagavatam, chant the holy name, and we'll be engaged in devotional service. So if we just stick to that core process along with the four regulative principles to protect our bhakti kripa, then we will make progress. It's when we neglect the core principles that we start to again enter into this gramya matahi, material consciousness. So if we just stick to it, then we'll see how we're making progress and how all this becomes clear to us, how the super soul's there in the hearts, and it becomes more and more clear that our real shelter is, the only real shelter is Krishna. And I'll just end by giving one analogy Srila Prabhupada gave in this connection. He gave the analogy of a child or even a baby on the lap of the mother. So if the child is upset and it's crying, then you can give the child to so many women, but the child, it's just not going to do it for the child. You see it sometimes. Someone, a devotee lady, is given a class or leading a kirtan or something, and the baby becomes upset. And you can try, and so many of the other ladies around are trying to pacify the baby, but it doesn't work. And I think we may have memories of that as well, being a young child. But it was only our mother that could pacify us. So Sri Prabhupada explained that the living entity is like that. It's only Krishna that can actually do it for us. But we're trying in so many different ways. Prabhupada was explaining how the conditioned souls are trying in so many ways, through this, through that, through this form, to doing this, through doing that, this occupation, this hobby, this, that. They're just trying to find that deep satisfaction and fulfillment and shelter. But it'll never happen. Only when they come to, when they start chanting Hare Krishna, then they see, finally got that shelter that I was looking for. So as we progress in our Krishna consciousness, the shelter becomes more and more important to us, and we more and more cherish and take shelter of Krishna in the form of his holy name. Okay. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any comments or questions? Good time in today. Been going too long. Anything anybody like to share or ask? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you very much for the wonderful class. Maybe it might be a question that because we can't enjoy the material world unlimitedly and unrestrictedly without suffering, without any form of pain or suffering or misery in this material world, it may be considered that this world is being created in a defective way for the living entities.
In a defective way, did you say?
Defective, yeah. So, like you mentioned that Lord Krishna created this world because the living entity wants to enjoy separately from the Lord.
Yeah.
But in order to enjoy separately from the Lord, you would think that this place would be created in a way where there's no suffering or miseries or anything like that. And so somebody may question that this world is actually not created for the living entity's enjoyment.
Yeah. So just for the internet, in case because you can't hear on the thing. Oh, you have the mic. Oh, okay. So they heard the question. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is that even if it was, as you say, like no suffering at all, trying to think how to answer this. So, okay, let me just answer it in a simple way first. So even if it was, as you say, no suffering, we would not be satisfied. And so it's Krishna's mercy that he has made it like that, that there's birth and death and the fourfold miseries, the threefold miseries. He's made it like that so that we can more quickly realize that this is not our home and come back to him. And even as it is, it's taken us a long time, even with the suffering. Imagine if there was no suffering. Imagine if there wasn't that suffering. I mean, we've been here for millions and millions of births, still haven't learned it despite the suffering. But imagine if there wasn't that suffering, how long? So it's Krishna's mercy because he knows we can never be happy without him. Yes, that's a simple sort of answer. Like in another sense, just from a logical point of view, we create, when we act independent of Krishna, we have to create our own happiness. Do you know what I mean? Through piety, we can get happiness come to us, but then when we perform sinful activities, there's reactions. It's like sort of like the idea, like people think they can sort of eat meat, kill animals, slaughter animals en masse, and everything's going to be alright. But they don't realize that they themselves in other words, what I'm trying to say is we are the ones who create the suffering. Yeah, we create the suffering because how can there not be a reaction? You cause suffering to another living being. How can that? It has to be like a balance, So that's another reason why there's suffering in this world, is because we're acting independently. So we have to create our happiness and we have to create our suffering. But that is all administered. We can't independently do it. It's all administered by Krishna through the demigods. But anyway, that's but maybe a bit esoteric, but it's just something to think about, that we ourselves are the ones creating the suffering actually through our sinful activities. And because we've come here with a mentality of envy, we are going to act inimically towards others because we have envy, and that's going to create suffering for us in the future. So it's just something, something we need to sort of think about, that we're actually responsible for our own suffering. It's not that Krishna's made us suffer; we've made ourselves suffer. This world is a place of envy. Everyone is envious. That's why we're here in the material world. And therefore, if you've got all these envious people together, there's going to be like clashes and fighting and that sort of thing. So, yeah. Is that right, bro? Makes sense.
Yes. No, it makes sense, your first answer, that without Lord Krishna, we can't be happy anyway. Like a child can't be happy without their parent, no matter how much they might be enjoying at a playground or something like that. They have to, they can't enjoy completely without their parents' love, So I understand that part. But the parent would never create a situation on the playground where the kids suffer on the playground, or they're feeling threatened or scared, that they need to turn towards their parents. Like, what I'm trying to say is, like, a child can't enjoy without the Lord, or their parents. That's fine. But it's where you've created a place where they are in a situation where they get scared or threatened or suffer, is the way that is a process by which you're getting the child to call out for you, call out for the parent, which
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to.
So so that's why this like Srila Prabhupada would give the example of the child wants to put his finger in the fan, and that sometimes that happens. The child wants to put his finger. The father stops the child, and he wants to go again. The father stops him again, but he keeps doing this. Eventually, what the father does is he switches the fan off, and lets it. And when it's sort of like not full blast, but it's still turning a bit, then he lets the child do it, and then the child feels and he won't do it again. But it wasn't like the fan was actually switched on. It was just to give him like a wake-up call. So the parent will do something like that. So in the same way Krishna gives us the material world, we actually don't, he didn't want us to come here. He tried not to let us come here, but we really wanted it. So he lets us come, but it's actually just, the soul is never affected. The soul is always completely separate from matter. So it's like this material world is like that fan with the plug pulled out. It's just like a play world. It's not like nothing's really. It's sort of like a dream in a certain sense, you could say. It is real, but the soul's never affected by matter. Actually, the soul's always pure. Yeah, soul's always free from matter. Does that make sense? Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, there's the body, then higher than that is the senses, higher than that is the mind, higher than that is intelligence. But then beyond even intelligence, transcendental to it all is the soul, is the actual person. Yeah. So we're never affected by matter. It's just, and Prabhupada explains that evidently Krishna really tried to stop us from coming, but we just were so insistent that eventually he said, okay, have this experience, you could say, but actually you're never affected by it. Yeah. Is that all right?
A couple of questions online.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the first question is, do we have information when we develop envy to Krishna? We fall down in the material world. How long does it take? And why does it take so long to review love for Krishna despite meeting pure devotees of the Lord? That's one question.
What is the first line?
Part of the question is, do we have information when we develop envy to Krishna? When we develop envy to Krishna. When?
Okay. We don't have, and you can't really say when because it's beyond time, but the spiritual world is beyond time. But Srila Prabhupada has mentioned quite a few times, I've read in his purports, that we can't trace out when and where this happened. Definitely, I've read that before. We cannot trace out when and where this happened. In other words, when and where we decided to turn away from Krishna. Prabhupada says we cannot trace it out. So I guess that answers that first question, that no, there is no way we can trace it out. What is the other one?
The second part is, it's asked, how long does it take? But as you mentioned, you can't trace time. And then why does it take so long to revive love for Krishna despite meeting pure devotees of the Lord?
Why does it take so long?
To revive our love for Krishna despite meeting pure devotees of the Lord.
Despite having met a pure devotee?
Despite meeting pure devotees.
Despite meeting pure devotees, okay. Depends what you define as long, It may seem long to us in our sort of paradigm of time. But in terms of like eternal time, it's not actually very long. Because we've been here for millions and millions and millions of births. And so from Krishna's viewpoint, it's not very long at all. one lifetime or a few lifetimes. What to speak of a few years? Even one lifetime or a few lifetimes is very short amount of time actually. So it doesn't take very long. No. We have to this idea of what is long and what is short. That's just our conditioned idea, but it's not um, it's not an accurate idea. Yeah.
And there's one more question. Why do we come back to Earth, and how long after we die we come back?
Depend. Our next birth may not be on Earth. It may be or may not be. As that verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita which was quoted in the purport, as that verse states, we're going all over the universe actually, in higher planetary systems, sometimes in lower planetary systems, according to our karma. And in terms of how long it takes to enter our next body, Srila Prabhupada has explained that it depends on how sinful we are. So if someone's more sinful, it will take longer. If someone is less sinful, it will be quicker, because you have to get reactions for those sinful activities first in the hellish planets before taking the next material body, next gross material body. Yeah.
There's another question. Envy is a quality of Maya, and yet it is said that Maya is not in the spiritual world. How can envy then be the cause of fall down? Do you have a verse to support your answer?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, the verse that I quoted was from the Prema Vivarta by Jagadananda Pandit. Krishna Bahir Mukhahaya Bhoga Vanchakare Nihikita Sta Mayatare Japatyadare. As soon as one becomes inimical to Krishna and desires sense gratification, he is immediately struck down by the illusory energy of the Lord. So that's what the verse says, As soon as one becomes inimical to Krishna and desires sense gratification, he is struck down by the illusory energy of the Lord. The question is, how can there be envy? If envy is a quality of Maya, how can it be in the spiritual world? Well, the only explanation that I've heard is that it's just because we have free will, and that free will can be used or misused. And the reason we have free will is that Krishna doesn't want forced love. So we have to choose to love Krishna. I mean, it just makes sense. We are the same. We wouldn't want someone to forcibly have to. We want someone to love us because they want to love us. So it's the same with Krishna. We feel that way because we're part and parcel of Krishna. So when that free will is misused, we turn our attention away from Krishna. And what I've heard Srila Prabhupada say is that it's not that in the beginning, like it's very subtle in the beginning. That's why your first birth is as a Lord Brahma, because it's very subtle. It's not like you don't end up being like a demon right away, or even like a really heavy materialist right away. It's just that you just want a little bit of something with Krishna, a little bit of something else with Krishna. And if we're honest, we can actually see the same tendency even now that we've taken to Krishna consciousness. We see how wonderful Krishna consciousness is, but due to our free will, we still sometimes feel like, oh, I just want a little bit of material with Krishna, a little bit of this material desire with our Krishna consciousness. So that tendency is there because we have free will. But like to end on a good note, Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita that once you've come back to him, you don't return to the material world. So, Srila Prabhupada is explaining we don't make that mistake twice. Although from a technical point of view, it is possible to make it twice, but Prabhupada says it doesn't happen because Krishna reminds us what it was like, and then we don't do it. If we were to even think of it. So, yeah, that would be my answer. That it's due to free will, and when we turn our attention away from Krishna, that's when we come under the control of Maya. But first, as a very elevated person who's still pretty much a devotee, just that is a little bit mixed. Therefore, we're in the material. Then gradually we sink down.
He's asked a follow-up question. You've sort of answered it, but I'll repeat the question anyway, the follow-up one. So he says, thank you. The verse describes the situation of the living entity in the material world.
There's a bit of noise I couldn't, yeah.
The verse describes the situation of the living entity in the material world, not spiritual world. That verse that you quoted.
In the Prema Vivarta.
Yeah.
The one I quoted. It could be, yeah. That is possible. But also not, Prabhupada has also referred to it as in the context that I used it, where that's how we've come to the material world. What the devotee is saying is not that it's not true. What the devotee is saying, that it can refer also to, like in other words, right now, within in the material world, if we now become enamored to Krishna, that our sense of gratification will be struck down by the illusion energy of the world. That's true. So it's true what the devotee is saying, but at the same time, Srila Prabhupada has used it in the context also that I referred to, where it's also referring to being from the spiritual world coming down. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Grancha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
His Grace Madan Gopal Prabhu ki jai.